Hey there, everyone. This is Gremloe in the editing bay. I wanted to upload this conversation unedited since it is a sensitive issue and there's a lot of emotion that goes into it. And I hope you can appreciate it unedited. And it kind of cuts off at the end because I rated into Arun at the end to show some support. So hope you like it. And hey, click that like button and subscribe.
Okay.
Nice.
Now we're good. All right. So you see a little bit of your thing over there.
Yep,
Awesome.
that's perfect.
So yeah, it's a first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be on here.
Hell yeah.
Um it's because I've been wanting to come on here to talk about Sri Lanka for quite a while. And I think what's going on in Sri Lanka is absolutely insane, but it gets even crazier once you basically like provide the context. By the way, how are you doing today? I forgot
I'm
to
doing
ask
good,
you that.
man. I'm doing good. Saturdays are always kind of just off the cuff. I don't really make plans for weekend streams. We just do whatever comes up. And
Gotcha.
talking to you on was it Stonercast the other night?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the Sri Lanka conversation ever since I brought it up. So I'm excited. I don't know really anything about politics in India or exactly what's going on in Sri Lanka. We did a little bit of coverage of it, but
Hmm.
much in the same way that I didn't do much coverage of Ukraine. Geopolitics is like kind of where I fall short. So at any opportunity for somebody to explain it to me, I'll take it, especially if they're a lefty.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. So I'm looking at your chat right now. Can we get a recap of what happened in Sri Lanka? Okay, so let's start with like what's been happening recently, right? So can you I was wondering if you can like get like some links pulled up just to show
Sure. Yeah, if you
yeah,
want, if
because
you
like
have some, send them over to me. I'll pull them up.
yeah. So I'm gonna send you a couple right now.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna send you a bunch of names that you probably that that will like if you know what the names are, it'll help understanding like what's going on here. And then this guy just to start things off a little bit because these are like the major players of um the Sri Lankan political system for like the past several decades or for the past decade or so. Um so so basically what happened was so basically what happened over the past 1 or 2 weeks is um so what happened was the you probably saw this, but they chased out the former president Gotabaya Rajapaksa, right?
Yes.
So and you saw people bathing in the pool. You saw people chilling in the pool, going to the gym and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so basically, the context for that is Sri Lanka is basically it has no money left. It has absolutely no foreign reserves left, right? It's running out. And in
And
addition to that,
is Sri Lanka
um,
like a municipality of India, like,
no,
or is it?
no. Sri Lanka is a different country
Okay.
altogether,
Okay.
right? So Sri Lanka is an entirely different country altogether, right? But it's right next to India and it's right next to the state of India that I'm from originally, which is in Tamil Nadu. Yeah.
Okay.
Sri Lanka is a sovereign country. It's a totally different country, right?
Okay. I didn't know
And
if this was like a post-partition thing or.
no. Sri Lanka was never part of India.
Okay.
So it was even under the British, it was never actually part of India, like the same way that Pakistan was, right? Or
Okay.
Bangladesh was. It was always different from India, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was like India. It was actually it was under the British, right? It was under British imperialism, right, for
Mm-hmm.
quite a while, and then the British left in 1947. But so the guy that just got historically was called Ceylon by the British. Yes, it was called Ceylon earlier, right? Um, so basically, the guy that got chased out, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he uh so basically what's happening in Sri Lanka is people cannot afford to buy things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can't afford to buy food, they can't afford to buy electricity, they can't afford to buy medical supplies. So they're having a lot of trouble getting supplies into the country. And it's because there's runaway inflation in Sri Lanka. the value of the Sri Lankan rupee basically declined drastically over the past. It was already climbing in the past decade, but it specifically shot up over the past year or so, right? And now, like last year, it was like 1 rupee was like 107. Sorry, $1 was 170 rupees, right?
Hmm.
But now, like $1 is 300 rupees,
Is this
right?
pandemic related?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So basically, the immediate reason why this is happening is the so Sri Lanka largely relies on a couple of things for its income, right?
Hmm.
It relies on remittances from abroad, so it relies on people sending, like Sri Lankans sending money back into Sri Lanka from abroad, and it also relies on tourism, right? So a lot of the things is that it relies on tourism, people coming into Sri Lanka, right? That's the surface level reason. The tourism industry basically declined in Sri Lanka since 2019 when the Easter bombings happened in Colombo. Tourism went down since then, and then COVID made it drastically worse. It basically killed it in its entirety, right? So there's like no one going into Sri Lanka at this point, except for some weird fucking like YouTubers now
Right.
that want to like that want to like that want to vlog the crisis.
Oh, a little
Um,
war tourism.
Yeah, literal war tourism. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's not war tourism,
Right.
but it's like
It's
crisis tourism.
yeah,
Yeah.
more appropriate.
So basically, what's happening is that people can't afford to buy things. They can't afford to buy food, medical supplies. Why did the remittances stop? They never stopped, but remittances is not enough. Like the bulk of Sri Lanka's economy is tourism. They never really stopped, but remittances isn't like as like tourism is such a big aspect of Sri Lanka's economy that it couldn't, like remittances alone isn't enough to make up for it, right? So basically what happened was people can't what's happening is people can't afford to buy things. So food is basically skyrocketing. They ran out of petrol, they ran out of gas, they ran out of electricity. It's all skyrocketing basically, the price of everything, right? Um oh shit. What's up, right? What's up, Kaya? How's it going?
Hey,
Friend of the show. What's
what's up,
up?
dude? Thank you for the raid, Ranch. Raiders, you know what to do. Just click on that link. We're talking to. Why don't you actually go ahead and introduce yourself to like my chat and the new raiders who are coming in, since we skipped that part
Yeah, no problem.
while we're waiting on this to kind of go through.
Rotted Ranch already knows who I am. I've talked to him before. I've been trying to talk to him about this whole thing as well.
Oh yeah.
But basically, my name is ArunAnnow. It's in the title. I'm a Twitch streamer. I usually talk about South Asian politics. On I talk about South Asian politics on my stream on the regular. Today we're gonna. I mean, other than talking with good friend Gremloe here, we're not really gonna talk much politics today. But normally Monday through Thursday, 10:30 p.m. EST, I usually talk about what's going on in South Asia. I usually talk about what's going on in India. I've been talking about what's going on in Sri Lanka for the past for several months or so. Um, and so oh shit, thank you for the follow. Um, you can see the follows on my screen. Wait, I just realized
It's all
that.
good. It's all
Yeah,
good.
no. I just think it's hilarious. But yeah, I talk about South Asian politics on my stream all the time, and that's basically like my bread and butter.
Mhm.
And if you want to know more about like what's going on in South Asia, hop on by. I do talk about American politics every now and then if like something really important comes up, like Roe v. Wade, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and whatnot. I will talk about that if the need arises, but mostly I stay in the realm of South Asian politics. Um, but yeah, and right now I'm talking with Gremloe about Sri Lanka and what's been going on there for like the past several months. And frankly, we're going to be diving into the history a little bit, quite a bit actually, because in order to understand like what's going on, because what's happening in Sri Lanka is like decades in the making, right? this, like, if you understand like what's been going on in Sri Lanka for a long time, we talk about my mods in here, Sandy Storm. We talk about South Asian politics 90% of the time and try to avoid DMCA for the next 10%. Yes. Yes, that is absolutely true. Um, Theory day. It's not really theory. We're just gonna go into history a little bit. But um, yeah, so basically, yeah, if you like that stuff, come give me a follow. I hope to actually like I mean, you gave me VIP in this chat. I hope to basically earn that spot by being informative. But yeah.
All right. So
Um,
if this conversation sucks, I'm taking away your VIP.
yeah.
All right,
Oh
hit me
no.
with it. Hit me with it. We got interrupted. So we were talking about Gotabaya.
So yes. So Gotabaya Rajapaksa, right? So Gotabaya Rajapaksa is the former president of Sri Lanka, right? And he was one of the main guys implicated in the whole crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I talked about the surface level reason as to why Sri Lanka's economy is like kaput at this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um Basically what's happening is what basically is happening the deeper issue is that Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa basically wrecked the economy in multiple different ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, one of the things that they did was they borrowed a lot of money they borrowed a lot of sovereign bonds and they borrowed a lot of money from countries like China and Japan. And what they did was they built white elephant projects. So, they basically built entirely vanity projects. So, here's an example of like, here's probably like the biggest example of like a vanity project. Where is it? Here's the biggest example of a vanity project. It's called the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport. Um,
Oh, I think we looked at this.
yeah, and this should give you an idea of like the. By the way, like yeah, so the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport. Um, Hold on a sec. Let me go back here. Let me show your screen. Uh, so the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport is basically an airport that was built in the southern side of the country in this town called Hambantota, right? So this is the Rajapaksa's hometown. And this was built in 2000, it was opened in 2013 by Mahinda Rajapaksa, so the brother of the president who was also the prime minister.
Okay. Oh,
I think
okay.
putting the debt onto China is super irresponsible. It's very much openly Western financial institutions in Japan, led by those same institutions. China holds less than 10% of the nation's debt. That's technically correct. So I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not blaming China for all of this, right? What I'm saying is China has a hand in all this, right? Yes, the Western institutions have been in Sri Lanka for a lot longer than China has, right? So they've been borrowing money from the IMF longer than they have from China. But this airport specifically was built entirely using Chinese loans, right? So this airport was borrowed mostly from Chinese, almost entirely from Chinese banks, right? And so this airport was such a disaster, right? This airport was a horrible disaster that like Forbes ranked it the emptiest airport on the planet. And no one used this airport, right? So no one ever used this airport, and it's like built in a town of like 8,000 people, right? And so basically it was so empty that they had to convert it into a rice silo. So they had to convert it into a storage facility for rice, right?
So there's more rice than planes going out of this airport. That's crazy.
Basically, yeah. That's basically what's going on here.
Okay. So we have infrastructure projects that are not bringing any revenue into the country. We have a currency that's in rapid decline, and we have what, based on what you're telling me about the actual like leadership organization, outright nepotism.
Yes,
Okay.
a complete nepotism, and on top of that, so like you also have, I mean, Matala Rajapaksa Airport is probably like the biggest example of like, it's probably like the biggest example of like horrific white elephant projects.
Mm-hmm.
But another example of what they did was they basically forcibly converted basically overnight told farmers that you're not allowed to use chemical fertilizer. Right? Again, using organic fertilizer is more ideal scenario than like using chemical fertilizer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Exorbitant war spending, buying hella weapons from the USA, China, EU, and your mom to bomb the Tigers. We'll get to that. China fucked these motherfuckers up so hard with predatory loan practices. Zero management. Yes, it's multifaceted. But we will get to the Civil War in a second, right? Because that's also super important to this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Gotabaya is the former president, right? So Gotabaya is the former president, and then Mahinda, who is his older brother, was the prime minister, right? And he also held the president position at one point, right? So this is like we're dealing with like untold amounts of nepotism going on here, right? So
Right.
Mahinda Rajapaksa is the older brother. Yeah, he's the president of Sri Lanka from 2005 to 2015, the prime minister of Sri Lanka, the leader of the opposition, and the finance minister. So he's been in politics for a long time.
Okay. And are they part of like a uh long-standing like conservative party?
Yes.
What is their
So
party like politics like? What do they represent? What's their message?
they're nationalists.
Okay, cool. Wait,
They're
is this the same party of Modi?
no. So the party of Modi's in India. They're
Oh,
not
no,
in Sri
sorry.
Lanka.
I don't know why I keep going back there. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, so they're a nationalist party, and probably, I mean, apparently not based on their at least their loans and isolationist, right?
Uh they're I mean, I don't know if isolationist is the correct uh I don't know if isolationist is the correct way of going about it, of talking about it, but
Okay.
basically these guys are probably the biggest nationalists in Sri Lanka. So their backing is largely is like the more nationalist elements of Sri Lanka, the Nazis elements.
Hmm.
Um yeah, and like by the way, and there's a guy in your chat that's saying like, oh, the Western institutions fucked them up way harder. Basically, I want to be perfectly clear. Everyone is involved in like what's going on in Sri Lanka. Every country is at fault in some way or another, right? It's not just the Western institutions and it's not just China. Like they've all been involved in Sri Lanka in some fashion or another, right? They all have a reason to. What's the major religion of Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka is largely Buddhist. So Sri Lanka is majority Buddhist, and we'll get to that in a second. But Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he was forced out recently. Mahinda Rajapaksa was forced out a couple months ago, and it's because they fucked up economically as well.
Mhm.
And as I was saying earlier, Gotabaya basically forced farmers to switch uh, from chemical fertilizer to organic fertilizer overnight, which basically destroyed Sri Lanka's self sufficiency on rice. So they had a 100% self sufficiency on rice earlier before making that conversion.
And no
And
cash injection to do the conversion to the organic.
yes, so
Oh
they
my
forcibly
God.
did. Yeah, they forcibly did it, and what that did is that destroyed their self sufficiency entirely on rice.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have to. So they basically had to start importing rice from India. So
Oh.
that's another thing that they did, right? They also fucked with people's food, exactly, right? Um, so that's another thing that's been going on in Sri Lanka. So they fucked up with people's food. They fucked up with they fucked up with the they fucked up with they also slashed taxes across the board as well. And Sri Lanka's revenue was also not like revenue didn't make up a huge chunk of the revenue also didn't make up a huge chunk of the taxes didn't make a huge chunk of the revenue to begin with, and they slashed taxes even further, right?
Okay.
So
So
that's
okay.
is just
Great.
everything that could go wrong, everything that you could do horribly wrong, they did wrong,
This is
right?
disaster management.
Horrible management. Now, the thing that people don't really talk about all that much, and they'll like gloss over and they'll talk about a little bit, is the Rajapaksas that were just thrown out,
Mhm.
right? they were elected by the very same people that threw them out in the first place, because these guys were basically in charge during the final stages of the civil war in Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
And that's a very important piece of the story to talk about, right? So the reason that's super important is because that tells you how these guys were elected to power in the first place, right? And
Okay.
so to give you let's to give you an idea of like the demographics of Sri Lanka a little bit, right? Right? Uh let me do this for a second.
You're good. I'm adding a command, or I'm changing up one of the commands so that people can pull up your stream.
Yeah. We hold on a second.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Um
Yeah, no, I'm living in a nightmare.
okay, so those are the demographics of Sri Lanka. So if you scroll down a little bit, that should give you an idea of how Sri Lanka is split up largely, right? Um so the majority of Sri Lanka belongs to an ethnic group known as the Sinhalese, right? Not this one. Like if you scroll down a little bit, there'll be a map of Sri Lanka. Um
Ah,
Yeah. So if you scroll down, that'll give you a better idea of what's going on. Yes, this one, the one with the. Okay, so the vast majority of Sri Lanka belongs to the Sinhalese ethnicity, right? And they,
that's the purple.
yeah, that's the purple, right? Um, they kind of trace their origins to what is now Bengal in like what is now Bangladesh, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? But these guys are all Buddhists for the most part. Some Christians here and there, right?
Where is your capital? Is this the yellow I'm seeing here, or
No, so the capital is actually closer to it's the southwest. So you see the yellow like on the southwest portion. Like it's surrounded entirely by purple, but like it's a mix of
okay?
g- go up a little bit. Yeah, right about there.
Yeah.
Right
Okay.
about there is
I'm
where
just
the
thinking
capital
like
is, right?
demographic disbursement, because is all of this purple like developed area? Is this rural? Is this a lot of like
So
undeveloped territory?
so everywhere is largely undeveloped,
Okay.
right? Except for Colombo. I mean, so now the way it works is like if you break it down based on income, right?
Mm-hmm.
The southern portions of the country are going to be richer than the northern portions of the country,
Okay.
right?
So where
And
the most of the demographic
Sinhalese
in the
art,
Sinhalese is going to be in like the southwestern developed part, right?
yes, and
Okay.
then
Okay.
the more so the northern parts of the country, which is predominantly Sri Lankan Tamil, is going to be more underdeveloped.
Okay.
Now, the reason for this is basically when the British were in power,
Mm-hmm.
what they did was they put certain Tamils into positions of power to racially antagonize the Sinhalese, right?
Mm.
And so colonialism has a fault in all this, but I am very careful to say like I want to like colonialism is at fault here ultimately, but the atrocities committed by the Sri Lankan government are solely the fault of the Sri Lankan government.
Right.
So basically, what's happening here is you have a minority that is going to be so the Sri Lankan Tamils have been historically marginalized since the British left, right?
Right.
The Indian Tamils and the Sri Lankan Tamils, as well as the Sri Lankan Moors, the nationalists have fucked with all three of these in some way or another. Um, and but mostly like it's mostly between the big ones that are under the crosshair are the Indian Tamils and the Sri Lankan Tamils, right?
Okay.
Um, now
Is there any power structures like old guard leftovers from British occupation, like
yeah,
families that were put into power and have like generational hold?
yeah, so there's something called the United National Party.
Mm-hmm.
They're the oldest party in Sri Lanka. And they're actually they're responsible for a lot of the atrocities that were committed against the Tamils. They were actually created closer to the end of the closer to the end of British occupation.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's also Banjarnaika as well. So I forgot the names. I forgot the initials, but Bandaranaike was also like a massively famous politician. Yeah, SWRD Bandaranaike. Um, so Bandaranaike has like he's also been like he comes from a massively political family even during the British, and he's also responsible for a lot of the ethnic marginalization that of the Tamils on the island, right? And fun fact, by the way, not so fun fact, his wife, Sirimavo Bandaranaike, is the world's first female prime minister. Um, so girl boss, except she also oversaw basically a continuous genocide.
Yeah, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Um,
Exactly.
I don't want to interrupt for too long. I just need to check on my dog real quick. She's
Yeah.
like sick, so give me just a moment. You can keep talking to chat.
Yeah, no problem, no problem, no problem. What's up, chat? Can you kickflip, bro? No, I cannot kickflip. Hi,
Okay, I'm
Arun.
so
Do the
sorry
not
about
do
that.
not do. No, no worries, no worries. Do the
Okay.
not do not do. I'm not fucking dancing.
Okay, so we're talking about territorial control and demographic placements and
Yes,
the political parties
yes.
of, let's see, you brought up SWRD. Okay.
Bandaranaike. Yeah, Solomon West Ridgway DS Bandaranaike. He's the founder of the left wing. He founded the Sri Lankan Freedom Party basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's nominally left wing economically, but he's also insanely like nationalist.
Okay.
So like he's also Sinhalese nationalist. So that's an occurring thing that you'll see in Sri Lanka. Basically, like I don't think you can call these guys leftists by any stretch of the measure. Um, but like they use leftist rhetoric, and then they also will talk about like how like Sri Lanka needs to be Sinhalese only, right? Like Sri Lanka
Mm,
needs to be a homeland for the Sinhalese. So they'll do like mildly left wing economic reforms, but then they'll be like super ultra nationalist.
gotcha.
Nasbal, I guess, I don't know.
One
Uh,
might say a national socialist.
a national socialist. Yeah. So his wife was also prime minister of Sri Lanka as well. Um, so basically, ever since Sri Lanka got its independence, Tamils have largely been marginalized, and they've been the victim of several ethnic pogroms, basically an ongoing genocide, right? And so, let me give you an example of the anti-Tamil pogroms, right? Um,
Okay.
of there's like four major ones. You can if you scroll down, there's like four of them major. Uh, there's four major anti-Tamil pogroms that happened.
Okay.
And they start in the 50s basically. And they keep going until like yeah. So if you mostly Sinhalese mobs, also Tamil mobs. Yeah. So go down a little bit. Yeah, there's four. Gal Oya 1977 and then Black July. And then there's also a library in the northern part of the country called the Jaffna Library. And the Jaffna Public Library was home to a lot of like priceless Tamil artifacts, right? Priceless cultural artifacts by the Tamils as well, right? So, and I sent you a video. Don't worry, it's not TOS.
Okay.
Um, but if you go to the black and white portions of it, basically, yeah, if you go to the like the black and white footage of it, it shows you basically what happened was they're priceless Tamil artifacts, like thousands of years old, right? One
Okay.
of a kind. And what ends up happening is basically those are palm leaf manuscripts from like 1,000 years ago, right?
Hmm.
From like thousands of years ago. And the cops as well as the fascists burned down this library.
Oh, sick. So they did war crimes.
Technically not war crimes because there isn't a war yet,
Well,
but
yeah.
yes. Yeah, this is cultural genocide that they're committing,
Yeah.
right? So Yeah. So like this is basically like all this basically some of the most important cultural artifacts for the Tamils is like gone. It's permanently gone. Crimes against humanity. Yes. That's a perfect way of saying it. Yes, crimes against humanity were committed in 1981. And I'm pretty sure that guy in the suit, yeah, this is what happened to the library. It like they had to reconstruct it.
My
Um
God.
yeah.
Seeing images of the reconstruction here.
Yeah. Wait, destroying cultural artifacts is cultural genocide now?
Yeah, gluttonous.
Yeah, dude.
What? Like you remove history and culture, identity.
Yeah.
That's cultural genocide. Like what?
They tar they targeted these guys because of their ethnicity, yeah. Like you got to understand this is like yeah, Sandy's basically saying it. These manuscripts are basically like if someone found an original bit of the Old Testament and just burned it because they don't like Abrahamic folk or they don't like Jewish people or
Yeah,
whatever.
or like if the Dead Sea Scrolls were burned in a pogrom.
Exactly, exactly. It's a lot like that basically, right? So this is a targeted piece of cultural genocide, right? Like this is a genocide that they're trying to do. The Tamils are related to the Dravidian language family, right? Yes. Tamil is the Dravidian language, yes. Uh IMHO genocide only applies to people, crime against humanity.
Dog, we
No, it is.
literally had something recently in like North American media about cultural genocide in First Nations peoples in Canada. Like what? Okay, you can ignore Gluttonous Machina. They I don't know what's going on with them lately.
No, I'm like it's weird. I'm somewhat like Hassan in that I like to fight with chat a lot.
Okay.
And um there's a difference between cultural genocide and genocide. Is there any chance of minorities grouping or is there too much bad blood in Sri Lanka? Um there's too much bad blood in Sri Lanka. So the Indian Tamils and Sri Lankan Tamils have often been grouped up. The Moors often it largely depends on the person. It largely depends on the person, right? It like some Muslims identify with the Tamil label, some of them don't. Um, it largely depends on the person, and to be fair, the Tamil tigers, which we'll get to, because Black July is what starts the civil war. Um, they killed a bunch of Muslims as well, so they're not they're not they're not they're not good guys either. But basically, they burn down this library into smithereens, right? And in retaliation for that, what ends up happening is in 1983. Don't show the picture on stream immediately because it is kind of questionable a little bit. But so Black July happens in 1983, and so what happens is uh what happens is basically the 15 so Tamil Tigers, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, which is a militant group formed in Sri Lanka at this point, right?
Hmm.
And what they're fighting for is they're fighting for a liberation. They're at this point fighting for a separate Tamil state on the island, right? A Tamil majority state on the island, right? So
Right.
that they don't have to be oppressed by the majority nationalists, right? Um, but basically they're fighting. Yeah. So this what happens here is in Black July, a bunch of Tamil tigers kill Sri Lankan soldiers, right? And in response to that, right? What happens is a bunch of fascist mobs get voter rolls from the government, get voter rolls from high-ranking government officials, and they get the location of everyone, right? And so what ends up happening is they target Tamil-owned homes and Tamil-owned uh, shops, and they burn it down, basically. So they burn like Tamil-owned shops, Tamil-owned homes. They kill Tamils, obviously, And trigger warning for chat, they sexually assault Tamil women and children. There's an entire, I just want to show you, by the way, this is the other thing that isn't talked about nearly enough. I just want you to look at this. Let me show you this. We'll save this for later, but like the amount of sexual violence committed against the Tamils is insane. It's untold. So basically, what's happening is, so basically the Tamil Tigers kill a bunch of Sri Lankan soldiers, and in response to all that, just look at the, you don't have to go through it, just look at the size of the scroll bar. It's tiny as shit.
Oh, fuck.
Just look at the size of the scroll bar.
Oh,
It's,
this.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, fuck.
yeah.
Oh
Oh,
my.
yeah. It goes all the way to 2021, by the way. Right? So this is madness, right? This is absolutely wild what's going on here. So
That's insane.
we'll come back to this in a second, right? So Black July happens, right? So about 3,000 people officially die, right? That's it's about hundreds to about a couple thousand that die in Black July, mostly Tamils, right? During that. And it's basically these guys are targeted by basically cops. They're targeted by fascist mobs basically in Sri Lanka, Sinhalese nationalist mobs in Sri Lanka as well. And so they're targeted directly by, and a lot of people die in that. And one example of what happened, there's a memorial. Let me see if I can find that, right? Black July Memorial Twitter. There's a, where is it? Black July Memorial Twitter. There should be something like this. If I find it, Sandy, if you can go find that, it's I think it's Amalini. I think this is it. How did we get here? I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But basically, what happened was there's the fascist mobs would basically ask people to say a particular word in the Sinhala language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't pronounce it with a Sinhala accent, then you would be murdered on the spot. You'd be killed on the spot. You'd be tortured on the spot. And the way you could tell is you wouldn't pronounce it with a Sinhalese accent. You would say it with a Tamil accent. And that is enough to basically be murdered on the spot, basically. So that's basically what's been going on. Like, that's what Black July was. It was a systematic targeting of Tamil people. And it was a systematic targeting of Tamils in response to the LTTE. Right?
Holy fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So this event is what kicks off the Civil War, right? So the Civil War rages on for about 25 years, and you have several players, including the current president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who tries to broker several deals with the Tamil Tigers, which all end up falling through at some point or another, right? So basically they've been trying to broker deals with the Tamil Tigers during that, and I'm oversimplifying the Civil War. A lot of shit happened during the Civil War, right? And it's really brutal and it's really like not great, right? But towards the end of the Civil War, because of the fact that a lot of basically because a lot of those deals with the Tigers fell through, right? What ends up happening is these guys, the Rajapaksas that I showed you earlier, Mahinda Rajapaksa gets elected president on the promise that he'll deal with the Tamil Tigers directly. He'll deal with them in as harsh a manner as possible. Because the Tamil Tigers did commit a lot of like war crimes as well. They also committed a lot of war crimes. So again, they're not innocent by any stretch of the measure. They also had child soldiers, and they also had really fucked up things going on there as well, right? And so But towards the end of the Civil War, and there's a documentary called Sri Lanka's Killing Fields that I do not recommend showing on stream, but I will send you the link to that if I can find it.
Okay.
But it's chat. Trigger warning. It is incredibly brutal to watch. It is incredibly TOS. And I only recommend watching it if you have the stomach for it. But basically, what happens towards the end of the Civil War is Mahinda Rajapaksa gets elected president, and he also appoints Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president that just left, right? So the prime minister that left like 2 prime ministers ago. So Mahinda Rajapaksa, right? He's president at this point in time. And the president that just fled, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he's the defense minister at this time, right? So he's basically the direct head of the army. And the president is obviously the head of the army as well, right? And so what happens towards the end of the Civil War, and I'm vastly oversimplifying the really horrifying shit that happened towards the end of the Civil War. So there are these no-fire zones that were set up, right? That technically neither the Tamil Tigers, the LTTE, or the Sri Lankan government were allowed to fire in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So neither one of them were supposed to fire into those no-fire zones, right? But what ends up happening is these tents are set up all throughout the no-fire zone, right? And what ends up happening is these tents, like these makeshift hospitals, are set up, right? And it's basically like the most squalor conditions imaginable. It's really, really, it's really bad. Like there are so many cases of, there are lots of cases of like amputations needing to be done and not having any anesthesia to do it. And they had to be done on like little boys and little girls and stuff. Just to give you an idea of like how horrifying the situation was. Right? Like basically they had to do an amputation with like a rusty knife, while like a kitchen knife, while covering the mouth of the boy while he was screaming. And on top of that, what the Sri Lankan government did is what they basically did was the Sri Lankan government delayed. They delayed as much as possible supplies going into the no-fire zones, right? It's really horrifying shit, right? It's really fucking horrifying. And like once if you watch the documentary, it's really fucked up. Like it's blood curdling, right? The amount of this so systematic cruelty. Exactly. It's really bad. Just changed my mind on watching that. God damn it.
Yeah.
They don't actually
watch that.
Yeah, don't watch it on stream, but like but like if you have the stomach for it, watch it. This stuff needs to be shown, right? Unfortunately. Because like the problem is like this stuff isn't talked about, right? Because here's the thing. Every government sold Sri Lanka weapons during this entire process. The United States sold Sri Lanka weapons. China sold Sri Lanka weapons. Israel sold Sri Lanka weapons. Every government is implicated in all this. Pakistan is implicated in all this. India is implicated in all this. India's probably like second most responsible for all this, right? For the Civil War, right? But yeah, again, watch it only if you're in the right mindset for it. But this stuff is really horrifying, basically. So there's also a bit where NGOs were serving the tiger controlled areas, the northern parts of the country, right? And the Sri Lankan government basically tells the NGOs, yo, you better leave or else we can't guarantee your safety, right? And they basically strong arm the NGOs. They basically threaten the NGOs with like, you'd better leave or else we're going to bomb you. We're going to kill all of you. We're going to bomb you into oblivion. So they force the NGOs to evacuate those northern parts of the country. And there's video of like the Tamil civilians there begging the NGOs to stay so that there will be witnesses to their deaths. right? Because if they're gone, no one will capture that. No one will capture them being shelled to death, right? And that's exactly what happened. The NGOs left, and whatever footage we could get from the Tamil side, they were basically shelled into oblivion. So, like, Doctors Without Borders was being threatened. Yes.
This
Yes.
is because Zoot points it out in the chat. It's starting to sound very reminiscent of Palestinian apartheid.
That's because you can draw that exact same parallel with Israel and Palestine. There's so many parallels you can draw. Like me talking about this, for example. So I'm ethnically a Tamil person, right? So this is why this shit hits personal for me, right?
Right.
But I'm not from Sri Lanka, right? My parents are from India, right? We're all from India. So we had to watch this, and I was 12 when all this stuff happened, right? So they aired all the war crimes that were happening on Tamil television, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that shit go down when I was 12.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. And it was really horrifying shit, right? It was really, really bad. And to give you an idea of what else the Sri Lankan army did, and this is what is showcased in the documentary towards the end, there's the name of a woman. So there's someone called Ise Priya. And this is trauma that is traumatizing as a child. A lot of us a lot of us had to watch all this, right, when we were children. So she was a journalist she was a Sri Lankan journalist and television broadcaster for the rebel LTTE. She died in the final days of the Sri Lankan Civil War. Trigger warning. She was sexually assaulted, tortured, and murdered. And like the quotes of the Sri Lankan army, that the Sri Lankan army guys, when talking about her, it's next level disgusting.
My God, she was only 27.
She's only 27, right? Reading her story gets my blood boiling. It is super hard for me not to get angry every time I read her story. Right? Yeah.
Was killed in battle. Interesting.
Yeah. She was a volunteer hospital at Mulivaikal. We'll get to why Mulivaikal is important, because that's basically where the Civil War ended. And so this woman was identified as Ise Priya on several sources. Don't read the sentence after that. It's like next level disgusting. In the next paragraph, read everything but the final sentence.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. This stuff happened in broad daylight, by the way. Like the clip of them saying that is still on the internet somewhere. They took, like, the Sri Lankan army. Like, I want to give you an idea of how depraved the army is, how disgusting the army is. Right? I want to give you an idea. They basically recorded themselves doing this shit to dead bodies, right? Saying this shit about dead bodies, and they uploaded it on the internet as though it's a prize or a trophy or whatever.
This is reminding me of Nicaragua.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very similar to, like,
Contras.
Nicaragua, a lot of fucked up shit happened in Central America due to American influence, right?
Mm-hmm. This is internal, though. Right?
This is, largely speaking, it is internal, but every country sold Sri Lanka weapons, basically. Every country. Were these people ever brought to justice? That's that's the next point. The very people that commanded this army were the guys that were just chased out a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
they were
shit.
Exactly my point. This is the thing that people don't talk about. That the people that orchestrated all this shit, they were elected to power because of this shit.
It's like if Kissinger was put in the White House.
Exactly. They were elected to power because of this shit. That's the point that I'm trying to drive home, right? These guys were put into power in the first place because of the war crimes they committed and the genocide they helped exacerbate. Wow, the way our media reported on the Sri Lankan protests, it's so dismissive. No, the reason that people don't talk about the history of Sri Lanka is because you'd have to dedicate like a decent amount of time to talking about it.
I mean,
That's the
we've been
problem.
talking for an hour, and we just got to that point. Like, there's so much that goes into it.
Exactly. There's a lot of stuff that people don't talk about because they don't have the time to talk about it.
Holy shit.
It's important to remember that nationalism can make demons into heroes and saints 100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Right? No, it's like like I've never like it's a blatant power grab, or it's a blatant power. It's like insane. Also, Western media doesn't care about countries outside the global north. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Fair.
Absolutely true. A lot of the stuff that happens with regard, like, justice is not happening. Like, these people have been begging for justice for like 13 years. They've been begging for justice for like decades because of Black July and pogroms about like that, right? And not a single like the thing is, we don't even have a proper death toll. We don't know how many people died towards the end of the Civil War. The best estimate is like roughly 100,000 people died like towards the end of the Civil War, right? And to give you an idea, that's the average size of a town in Sri Lanka. That's the average size of a town. It's roughly 100,000 people. So villages, entire villages were shelled.
Jesus
right?
fuck.
Right? And no one's talking about that. Like, to give you, like, we were talking about the whole point of like how you can draw a parallel between Israel and Palestine in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a parallel. I'm Indian Tamil. I was on Jason's podcast talking about this a little bit earlier. I did an interview about the whole Sri Lanka the Tamil genocide of Sri Lanka, as well as the current economic crisis right now. Right? I was talking about that with a bunch of people, right? And I was talking about that with Ice Beans. If I don't know if she's in the chat right now, but I was talking about that video. And I was mentioning like, oh, this is like the economic crisis that's happening. These guys fucked the economy over. And then the moment, there was a Sri Lankan guy in the chat. The moment I mentioned genocide, the moment I mentioned war crimes, the moment I mentioned mass sexual assault against the women and children, I got branded a terrorist.
Oh, yeah?
I got called a terrorist for that. Right? The moment I bring up the wrongdoings of the Sri Lankan government, because the thing is, and this isn't to paint a broad brush over all of the protesters that are doing all this right now. But the thing is, a lot of that are like fighting against the government right now. Again, there are plenty of allies within that movement as well, right? So I'm not trying to paint a broad brush, but there's a decent chunk of people in those protests that are not angry that they elected genocidal war freaks to office. They're angry that their crumbs were touched.
They're angry that what now?
That their crumbs, that their money was touched.
Oh, of course.
That their conveniences were touched.
Of course.
Right? That's the problem. I imagine there's statues of these war criminals all over Sri Lanka. The main airport is named after Bandaranaike, who's basically like the largest nationalist in Sri Lanka. Like, he's one of the earlier prime ministers of Sri Lanka, right? It was back then known as Ceylon. Yeah. The airport in Colombo is named after SWRD Bandaranaike. That's the airport is named after that, right? Is named after this guy, right? And the other thing is, like, after this, so the Civil War ends. We're not even done with the Civil War yet, but these no-fire zones are basically set up. These tents are all set up, right? Right? Basically, these are meant to be no-fire zones, right? Sri Lanka goes back every single time on those agreements, and they bomb those tents. They bomb those camps. They shell those camps into oblivion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they go back on those no fire agreements, right? And this happens so often. This happens this happens to the point where it happens at there's a place called Mulivaikal, right, in northeastern Sri Lanka, right, and Mulivaikal um, is a town in northeastern Sri Lanka where where basically the civil war ends. Everyone is shelled into oblivion, and a lot of people are captured, including the leader of the LTTE, right? And Velupillai Prabhakaran is killed in that raid, and that basically ends the civil war, right? But roughly tens of thousands to over hundreds of thousands of people died in that raid on Mulivaikal, right?
Right.
And a lot of people are victims of basically a genocide, right? A lot of them are war combatants, and so that, like, when you are a war combatant, the ideal scenario is to be captured. But unfortunately, certain governments will there's a danger present there because a lot of the Tigers were basically the pioneers of the suicide bomb, and so I understand why you might want to eliminate legit, actually known tiger threats.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just to reiterate, I am not a Tamil Tigers supporter. I want to reiterate that just to be perfectly clear, right? I'm not a Tamil Tiger supporter at all, right? Like, the Tamil Tigers threatened to kill my grandmother and they threatened to kill my dad. Like, they threatened to kill my family. So I am no fan of the LTTE. They threatened to kill my family, right? Mm-hmm. So I have beef with them, right? I just want to be perfectly clear about that, right? Just so that there's no doubts in the chat. I am not an LTTE supporter. They threatened to kill my family. I know somebody whose uncle was killed by the LTTE. So no, I'm not a fan of them. May I ask if you're Muslim? Because I've read Muslims are also having a bad time in India. Yes, they are, but that's a totally different. That's a totally different topic, right? That's a totally different story, right? But also Muslims have had it bad in Sri Lanka, but the thing is, because they've had it, because the LTTE also basically ethnically cleansed the Muslims from the northern parts of the country. They're also not fans of the LTTE, and some of them supported the Sri Lankan government. So that's why it's a little more complicated than I'm making it out to be. But overall, right, basically there's an open genocide that's been happening for the past 70 years in Sri Lanka. And basically no one's reported on this. And that genocide is super important to talk about because those fucking leaders were elected to power in the first place. They were elected to power. The people that committed those massacres and the people that committed those massive amounts of rape, right? During this time, during the end of the Civil War, those guys were asked, one army official in their command was asked about the mass sexual assault, right? But the response from the army official is probably the most bone-chilling shit you'll hear in a while, right? The army official responded with, "We train our soldiers to despise the Tamils and treat them like animals. So why would our soldiers want to fuck animals?" That's in response to them being pressed on sexual assault of Tamil women and children.
The fuck?
So are everyday Sinhalese people hateful racist towards the Tamils? So no, I'm not going to generalize all Sinhalese people and be like, they're all hateful towards the Tamils. No. But your average Sinhalese person is more likely to just agree. The problem is there have been genuine attacks done by the LTTE that are horrific, that are really bad, right? And so the LTTE is also not blameless in all this. And so they have a right to be angry about the LTTE. But the problem is the Sri Lankan government has more blood on their hands than the LTTE does, by far. And so there's a general position in Sri Lanka that LTTE bad, and so anything to stop the LTTE, however brutal it may have been, is good.
And we're also talking about something that's systemic, right?
Yes.
You just talked about the guy who said we train our soldiers to think this way.
Yes.
If you don't think that doesn't exist within the education system, within the pedagogy, again, I bring it back to Israel Palestine. These things are normalized, right? So the average person may not have like super strong feelings, but they'll be agreeable to certain conditions.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, the thing is now, like, there's an attempt to move on from that,
Hmm.
but the problem with that, I mean, and I want to hope that this is good, right? I want to hope that the direction that people are moving in is good, but I want to dampen that a little bit. I want to like bring some realistic qualms with that, right? So here's one problem, right? Here's one problem immediately. A lot of monks joined the protests in Sri Lanka. They joined the insurrection. And the problem is the monks are probably the biggest fascists in Sri Lanka. So the fascists that voted the Rajapaksas into power in the first place have now turned on them. Now the thing is, the fascists have a decent amount of influence in Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
And my fear is that uh that lesson won't be learned, right? What will be learned is we just need a more there's a possibility that people will vote for a more, let's just say, economically responsible fascist, right?
Right.
Than than an actual like leftist, right? And the problem is the current president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, is also implicated in a lot of this as well, because his party, the United National Party, is responsible for the pogroms that led to the Civil War, right? In fact, the current president's uncle, so this is not the Rajapaksas that we're talking about. Uh, let me see. Ranil Wickremesinghe, let me give you that guy's link. Um, where are you?
One
Here you
says,
go.
would you draw parallels between LTTE and something like the IRA? Because if so, would you lay any blame on the acts of that group on the oppressive force, radicalizing them with the cultural genocide? Like how my own history, Celticness, who's asking this, is Irish. Like my own history in Ireland, better, or like I know my own history in Ireland better, but no British oppression and no IRA is a reality here.
I think I know what you're asking. So basically, what you're asking. So let me make sure I'm. Let me make sure I'm 100% correct. Basically, what you're asking is like, is the formation of the LTTE as a result of? Can you blame like a lot of the things that the LTTE did indirectly on the Sri Lankan government? Right. Ultimately, can you rest the blame on the Sri Lankan government? Is that what you're asking? Basically, like,
Yes, like
is it?
does the conditions that oppressed people are put upon, like can you really like put all the blame of their
Yes.
actions upon them?
To answer that question, yes. Yes, the LTTE wouldn't fucking exist if the government wasn't, fascist and
Right.
weren't full of genocidal freaks. That wouldn't have happened 100%.
Yeah.
There were multiple peace talks. There were multiple like peaceful protests that did exist leading up to the Civil War, and they all failed. The nationalists were not having any. Uh, the nationalists were not having any of it,
Hmm.
right? Um, the reason the the I mean the let me I sent you the link, right? I was gonna send you something.
Yeah, I got the
Ranil
Ranil.
Wickremesinghe.
Yeah.
Ranil Wickremesinghe. He's now the president, and so basically he's now the president of Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
He's held prime minister 5 times. He's held prime minister for 5 terms. By the way, hasn't completed a single one of his terms. By the way, are there any big opposition parties against the ruling party? There's a guy called Sajit Premadasa, right? If you're gonna ask, like, are there any big communist parties in Sri Lanka? The answer is no. Uh, no. There are communist parties in Sri Lanka, but there really aren't any.
Marginal.
They're not popular.
Yeah.
Like, so this is the big opposition leader that everyone's floating as a alternative to Rajapaksa. But I'm about to ruin this guy for you as well. So the other guy, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is now the current president and held like prime minister for like 5 terms, not completing a single one of his terms.
Hmm.
His uncle was the president. His uncle is Julius Jayawardena, J.R. Jayawardena. It's right there. His uncle was the no. It's like in the paragraph next to it.
Oh, okay. Oh, here he is. This guy.
J.R. Jayawardena, right? His uncle was the president during Black July.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Sick. Weird how these
Oh
how
no,
these neoliberal fascists all have a little bit of nepotism happening.
it gets worse.
Oh, good.
I gave you Sajid Premadasa. He's like the main opposition leader,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sajid Premadasa. Now he actually enjoys a lot of support among the Tamils, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's probably the only other like legit option on the table, right?
Right.
His father was the prime minister during Black July.
Oh.
His father is Ranasinghe Premadasa. His father is also responsible for the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Basically, Sri Lanka has largely been run by a couple of families. It's largely been run by a bunch of families. So Sajid Premadasa was part of the United National Party, which is the party of Ranil Wickremesinghe, right?
Right.
But he is no longer part of that party. He is now part of something called the Samaj. I don't know how to pronounce it in Sinhalese. It's called Aikya Makkal Sakti in Tamil, right? It's called the United People's Power. And again, they're also like a neoliberal party. There's really no leftist party in Sri Lanka that's super popular, unfortunately.
And these guys that all are like generational politicians, do these families have like I understand that the economy is in the toilet, but do these politicians have like connections to industry? Are they like farm plantation owners, factory owners?
They're basically these guys are just very strong I mean, to my knowledge, right? And I could be wrong. I don't know too much about their families, but my understanding is that they're massive like lawyer families. So they're already like massively political families to begin with.
Okay, so they're basically like through the legal system, they've been able to like get political power.
Yes, basically.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so they've been able to get political power because of their establishment within the families. I mean, this dude is like Ranil Wickremesinghe is a cockroach.
Mm-hmm.
Like this fucker will not go away, right? This like he served prime minister he served the prime ministerial position 5 times and he hasn't completed a single one. But nonetheless, he managed to take the presidential position, right? Because the parliament recently voted to elect him president. So it wasn't even the people that actually voted for him to be president. It was the fucking parliament.
That was
right?
like in the last 2 months?
That was in the last 2 weeks.
Oh, the last 2 weeks. Okay, so
And by the way, just for the record,
yeah.
The guy that's president now, he was actually the previous prime minister.
And I don't know what the government structure is like, but is that not like if the president dies, is assassinated, leaves office, whatever, is that not the line of succession that the prime minister would take over? Okay.
I mean that for temporary purposes, yes, the prime minister would take over temporarily, but he's actually elected prime minister. Sorry, he's elected president now
by the parliament, not by popular mandate.
Yes.
Okay. Sick.
Yeah. So, and this guy's also responsible. Like, this guy's also responsible for the economy going to shit as well, because this guy is basically like the equivalent of like an Obama figure or like a Biden figure, right? So when the economy was tanking, when the Rajapaksas were fucking up the economy, this guy basically didn't do anything to help stop it. Is everyone just corrupt as fuck? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. Basically, it's really fucking stupid. It is really, really, really fucked, the situation in Sri Lanka. Now, I will say this. I want to, I do want to sprinkle a little bit of hope in this. So one of the major opposition candidates was part of the protest. If I can find his name, I forgot his name already, but he's a member of a communist party in Sri Lanka. That doesn't have any real votes it doesn't have that many votes in the parliament to begin with, but he's very prominent in that he was a major part of the protests, right? So that is some hope to look forward to. Again, I don't know what his politics on the Civil War were, Um, and the other thing was like a lot of the war crimes were blamed on leftists, weirdly enough, in Sri Lanka as
Yeah,
well.
crazy how that happens.
Yeah, it's crazy how that happens, right?
So we've got the broad brush of the history,
Yes.
right? We've
Yes.
kind of brought it back into the contemporary politics.
Yeah.
Walk us through the American media's coverage of those protests, like what we were told, and then maybe like contextualize it appropriately for us to these protests that ousted the people who were previously in power, if you could.
So basically, to answer that question, the best way I can describe it is it's a broad spectrum of coverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the best case scenario that you're going to see is that I'm gonna just run through basically the way they would say it, right? They would basically say it as the best you're gonna hope for is uh, the Rajapaksas were elected to power on the backs of the Civil War. They've been accused of committing war crimes during the Civil War, and this is how they got into power. That's best case scenario. That's absolutely best case scenario. You're never going to hear the word genocide. That's not a thing. You're
Right.
never going to hear the word genocide. Um, so most of the coverage that I've seen usually mentions it usually talks about like, oh, there are these remittances, like the tourism industry was basically destroyed. The Rajapaksas did this with the economy,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they'll overemphasize China's involvement in all of this, right?
Right.
I think
Well,
one of your
of
chatters got
course they're
mad at
not going
me.
to mention genocide because this is not a country with a prominent leftist party, and it is, however, taking loans from China, so we can focus on that in American media.
Yeah, it is taking loans from China, right? And like all the nationalists, like even like Wyon, which normally actually does kind of good coverage on this, they over like they actually like Wyon is an Indian nationalist news network, like not Hindu nationalist, but like they're like civic nationalists. They're kind of like a CNN kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
of India. Um, in certain aspects, they have some conservative politics on there, but like that's a different story. That's neither here nor there. But like a lot of times, people will overemphasize China's involvement in Sri Lanka, and uh, it like you do need to call out China for its involvement in all this because China did directly sell weapons to Sri Lanka towards the end of the Civil War,
Right.
largely because, because the Rajapaksas leaned more towards China. They relied more on China than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because China acts as a geopolitical check to India, right?
Oh.
So, because India and China are not on good terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find people calling out China first and then moving on. Um, No, the reason I like everyone's involved in this, right? If they didn't give them a loan, then the IMF would have. Exactly, right? The IMF is also currently working on giving like predatory loans in Sri Lanka, right? So again, everyone's implicated in all this, right? But that's so the coverage is usually like China is to blame for this. Um like the Rajapaksas fucked up. Uh they and the best case scenario is like they'll tell you, oh shit, someone subscribed. Thank you so much. I'll just let that roll.
I'm curious what the alert sound is.
Uh that's a that's a Tamil meme.
Oh, okay.
That's that wait, who what happened here? Oh shit, thank you for the 5 gift subs.
Oh, it's Critical Ace Theory. What's up, Critical Ace Theory?
Oh shit, thank you for the oh, thank you for the follow. Oh my god. Thank you everyone. I appreciate it.
Yeah, folks, here. You can get a link to Arun's channel if you just do command guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me on by the way.
Oh
Just
yeah,
I just
no
want to
problem, dude.
reiterate that.
I'm having my
So
mind blown right now.
Um, so so basically, the best case scenario for coverage on this is, um, basically the best case scenario from Western media, especially, is like Rajapaksas were elected to power. They borrowed a lot of money from China and they blew it. And on top of that, like the tourism industry also like caved, like destroyed the economy, and now people can't, they can't afford anything anymore.
Yeah.
And the best case scenario with regards to how they got into power is they talk about like, oh, there's a civil war that happened, and the Rajapaksas are considered war heroes. And then maybe like absolute best case scenario is they're accused of war crimes. They are accused of war crimes, right? But basically most of the coverage you'll see from the West, aside from like the BBC, right? And the BBC is even like iffy on this as well. But basically, you probably won't even hear about that part. You won't ever hear about how they got into power in the first place.
Right.
You won't ever hear about that. That's like the main difference. That's like, so you'll just hear that these guys fucked up the economy somehow, some way, right? And then now people are angry that they fucked up the economy and then they chased them out. That's generally the coverage that you'll see. Even Democracy Now! Doesn't like, even Democracy Now!, which I generally like, right? They made up for it by bringing a Sri Lankan economist on there.
Right.
Have you told him about how the ex-president tried to flee yet? No.
We're getting there.
Mahinda Rajapaksa Gotabaya also tried to flee. So he also tried to flee the country. He tried to go to India. India was like, fuck you, we're not having you in this country. He fled to the Maldives. The Maldives found out he was there, and they chased him out of the Maldives, and now he's in Singapore now.
Oh, yeah, Singapore will take him.
Yeah, he's in Singapore now, right?
Holy shit.
Yeah, and
I'm
so
surprised that he's not hanging out with Fethullah Gulen out in the fucking Poconos right now.
No, he's not. That's not happening because he's too pro-China.
There we go.
That's the problem, right? The other thing is like the other thing I forgot to mention was I was gonna say something about oh yeah. So there was one U.S. official that I saw, right? Let me pull this up. That actually did the right thing on this. Believe it or not, and I'm gonna have you guess the guy's name in 3 guesses.
Okay. Who was involved with getting him out, or
who was no? So basically, what happened was there was an official that was barred from Sri Lanka.
That's
barred from Sri.
That's probably either Talib, Omar, or Bernie.
No. So let me finish. Right.
Okay.
So basically, so there's a Sri Lankan official barred from entering the United States. Right?
Oh, okay.
Right. Because of their because of the alleged human rights violations during the final phase of the Civil War. Guess who basically the State Department banned them. The State Department actually did the right thing for once.
Oh.
State Department did.
Fuck. Why though? America usually doesn't have an issue with that shit.
Because these guys are pro-China, basically. That's the reason. Like the Sri Lankan officials are more pro-China, basically.
That's crazy that like Red Scare shit runs that deep. Like anti-China stuff runs that deep.
State Department did something good, sussy. No, this is like one of the few things where like the State Department is correct. Like, and when I tell you the name of the guy that was the head of the State Department when all this happened, you're not going to believe me. But he actually did the right thing for once. I'm not joking. Mike fucking Pompeo.
Mike Pompeo? Shut the fuck up.
Mike Pompeo actually did the right thing for once.
The guy that wants to glass Afghanistan?
Yes. I'm not joking. He actually did the right thing for once.
That's crazy. And this is when?
Upside down world. This is like to give you an idea of how fucked the situation in Sri Lanka is. Like when Mike Pompeo does the right thing, you know you're in the wrong.
Right.
When fucking Mike Pompeo does the right thing, you're totally in the wrong.
Yeah. Under no circumstances should you side with Pompeo.
Yes, exactly the point. You should never side with Mike Pompeo except on this issue.
And this was
This was in 2020.
2020. I was about to ask. Okay,
This happened in 2020. Yes, it just happened that their interests were aligned with the morally correct choice. That's literally what happened. This is literally a broken clock is right twice a day moment.
Yeah.
That's how fucked the situation in Sri Lanka is, just to give you an idea. It's absolute madness that's happened. Like before that, by the way, they were all the U.S. government was buddy with Sri Lanka.
Mm-hmm.
So Colin Powell visited Sri Lanka in the aftermath of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
John Kerry visited Sri Lanka for an official tour.
I remember
during the City Sena government.
Yeah.
And the City Sena are Rajapaksa allies, right? So he's also a massive nationalist. So that should give you an idea of how fucked the situation is that Mike Pompeo gets it right for once.
Stunning. The worst person you know just made a good point.
Exactly. That's how bad it is, right? So what were we talking before this? Oh, yeah.
We were talking about like the lead up to the protest and kind of how the protest itself got started.
Was where we're covered. Yes, we were talking about the coverage, right?
Yeah.
So we were talking about like how basically the West covers a lot of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to see how China covered all this or like how other non-Western allied nations covered all this, but I'd be very surprised if they even said the word genocide either. Like it
would shock me, honestly.
It would shock me if they said it, right?
Especially like with the way that China is criticized with like the Uyghurs, for them to like, you know, say, oh, look at them, they're doing that, you know, immediately the entire Western media apparatus is like, oh, well, you're a hypocrite, China.
No, I'm saying like I would be surprised if China like called it a genocide. Like if they covered it in their media and they like called it a genocide. I'd be surprised if they did it as well. Yeah. India, like also India's another reason that you don't hear. See, so the thing is, this gets less coverage than like Palestine does.
Mm-hmm.
This gets less coverage than like even the Myanmar situation does, like the Rohingya genocide. And the reason for that is, like the people that are supposed to like there's like Tamils are basically like a stateless minority. We don't have a quote unquote homeland. And again, I lean more towards an anarchist direction, right? So I'm not a big fan of nation states, regardless of like where, like I'm not a big fan of any of them, right? But basically, like one thing that the one thing is that even other Indians don't know about this because the LTTE basically the where on the globe is Tamil history from? So there's a place called Tamil Nadu in India. Let me just type it in the chat. There's a place called Tamil Nadu. Oh, wait, why the fuck is this not working? Tamil Nadu in India, right? So Tamil Nadu in India, that's basically one part of the Tamil heartland, and then the other part is the northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka. And then there's also a bunch of us in Malaysia and Singapore, thanks to the British, basically sending us as bonded laborers to those countries as well. So the basically before we were talking about this, we were talking about India, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, in the 1990s, India was also involved in all this, and they also committed war crimes themselves. The Indian government sent in what's called the Indian Peacekeeping Forces, right? So the IPKF was meant to basically, on behalf of the Sri Lankan government, basically subdue the tigers, right? So they were meant to subdue the insurgent group, right? And basically what ended up happening was the IPKF ended up committing war crimes themselves. They also committed like sexual assaults and war crimes themselves in Sri Lanka against Tamil women and children. And they were signed at the behest of Rajiv Gandhi, right? Yeah, peacekeeping Pepela. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So they went in 1987 to 1990. I believe, let me see, shortly thereafter, there's an entire subsection on the sexual violence that was committed by the IPKF.
Wait, let me find that. Oh my, there is.
Yep.
How lengthy? Oh, that's lengthy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's war on the LTE in order to disarm them. During this conflict, the IPKF raped thousands of Tamil women. One IPKF official accused these by stating,
Yeah.
all wars have them. They are psychological reasons for them, such as battle fatigue. Oh, they were just tired, guys. They were just tired.
Oh God. You understand
Yeah.
how like talking about this like for months on end makes you go crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
So, is
in
this
response,
because of your like upbringing that you're like very familiar with this, or like what got you so like where does your like apparently robust knowledge in this come from? Like, is it because of your family? Like,
a part of it comes from, yes, a part of it does come from family because so like I mentioned, so my family is from the Indian state of Tamil Nadu. We're ethnic Tamils in Tamil Nadu as well. And we were basically like a lot of what happens in Sri Lanka affects us directly, right? Especially us, right? And a perfect example of this is shortly after the IPKF went into Sri Lanka and committed those war crimes, the prime minister that signed all of that stuff was promptly assassinated by the LTTE in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
So that does have like a backlash effect of what happens where I come from, right? So we had to see a lot of this, and a lot of it was super harrowing to see. And
Right.
I remember like watching all the fucked up shit that the Sri Lankan government did. Like, and this is like barely censored, by the way. Like, I saw the gore, I saw the violence, and I saw like all that stuff when I was like 12. And that really affected me. And I was like angry that no one was doing anything about this. Um, like I was like borderline. Like when I first started talking about all this, right? There was a stream where I literally came in and I was talking about like there's this movie called Tenali, right? Which is a Tamil movie. It's not directly about the Sri Lankan civil war, but it's about basically a guy with PTSD, whose family was murdered by the Sri Lankan army, right? And this guy basically this guy's afraid of everything, right? He's played by a famous actor called Kamal Hassan, right? And like that movie, so Tenali is a fantastic movie, but Tenali, right? That's like one movie, right? Tenali. So the guy that's playing this is he's playing a character with PTSD, severe PTSD. And um the whole point is about like he has to go get therapy for his PTSD because he's fucking scared of everything. Like everything frightens him, right? And everything gives him PTSD. And so it's basically it's really like a black comedy sort of it's a black comedy sort of thing where it's like you see like there's a dialogue in there that I was watching on stream and I was covering this at the same time. And I basically fucking broke down in tears.
Yeah, it says this is because of his numerous phobias he's developed due to the Sri Lankan War.
Yeah, at the time they didn't have PTSD for this, right?
Right.
They didn't say PTSD. Another good movie is Kanatil Muttamit. It's called The Peck on the Cheek. I'll just send you the name of this, right? This is about I recently watched this. This is the first time I watched it like a couple months ago. It's about an adopted Sri Lankan Tamil girl who was adopted in India, right? Who wants to go see her biological mother, right? She finds out she's adopted and she wants to go find her biological mother. And basically, her and her family go to Sri Lanka during the middle of the Civil War. So you get an idea of, you only get a small fraction of like the horrors of what happened in Sri Lanka. But it's like it largely comes from like it largely comes from my family background, and the fact that a lot of this I kind of knew going into it, but um going into like streaming on Twitch, I've known this like since I was a kid, but I wasn't able to directly do this sort of thing where I talk to people on stream and give like a sort of lecture almost on, or an interview almost on, like how all this played out, because a lot of it was just like emotional, like a lot of it was just like bent down anger, right? A lot of it was just anger that was like pent up for quite a while. And Kanatil Muttamatal is also a wonderful film to watch regarding the emotional toll the war took on the people. Note both of these films were made before the later stage of the war, so some of the gnarly shit is left out. Kanatil Muttamatal is a wonderful soundtrack for anyone that's into that. Um, Sandy, there's a story about your neighbor that I want you to tell on stream, that I want you to put in chat, if possible. Uh, it's about your neighbor and the psychological toll, the psychological trauma that this stuff has taken on this is taken on an entire generation of people, right?
And it's intergenerational.
It's
not just-
intergenerational. It's intergenerational trauma that's been happening in Sri Lanka and in Tamil Nadu for a while. Like Rajapaksas, like the Rajapaksas are just the most mask off of the war criminals, right?
Right.
There's a song from that movie that I vibe to a lot. It's called White Flowers. I'll put the name in chat. But Sandy, if you can tell chat that story, like Gremloe's chat that story about, like, it's a bit too long to put on chat. Okay, so I'll say it and then tell me where I'm missing the details. But basically, there's more to the story now too. Oh, okay. Well, basically, I'm gonna tell the story and I'm gonna see. Or do you mind if she comes on to talk if she's available? Because I want her to tell that story.
I mean, that's totally up to Sandy if they're okay with sharing.
Yeah.
No pressure or anything.
Yeah, Sandy, do you think you can? If you don't want to come on and share, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to mess up the story. But basically, like this is taking a toll. This is intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, it's gotten to the point where, like, Sri Lankans themselves, I don't know what y'all server are on. I'm in Gremloe server. I'll give you the invite.
Yeah, I got it in the chat right here.
Okay, awesome.
Just hop into any of the channels and I'll pull you in.
Got you. But yeah, this stuff is super harrowing to talk about, and I've been trying to get people to listen to this as much as possible, and people like Jason Society, Aston Mac, 2 minutes I'll be there, awesome. I've been talking to like as many people as I possibly could about this, because this is like I've been tearing my hair out, like, because when people cover Sri Lanka, they're only seeing like what everyone else is putting out there, and those guys are leaving out a bunch of context to all this, right? And they're leaving out like a lot of things that yeah, this feels very important. Thank you very much for doing this.
Are there any advocacy groups within the U.S. that could like try to get some kind of media coverage?
Not to my knowledge, unfortunately.
Oh, I see Sandy's in the Discord. Let me go ahead and pull him in. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. By the way, chat, this is my moderator, so say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
And usually we roast each other, but like I guess because of the
Yeah.
gravity of the subject, like I just want to give her some props because I feel like it's important. She's basically the one that basically helped solidify a lot of the talking points that she's basically the one that basically grounded the information, because she lives in Chennai right now. So she lives in India at the moment, right?
Okay.
Most of my moderators are in India, but she's, I think, the only moderator that lives in Tamil Nadu right now. So
Yeah,
she helped ground a lot of this information, basically.
yeah. And just to give a little bit of credibility, I'm a student. I'm a journalism student, and I also worked as a journalist until quite recently. So a lot of the information that I do go through, I try to make sure it's either from people who have actually survived the war, or really credible sources.
Right.
So, but the story that I'm about to tell is a personal story.
Okay.
Um, I grew up in Chennai, right? And Chennai is the city. It's a southern Indian city, the capital of Tamil Nadu, where a lot of um, Sri Lankan refugees went to. So this is where they sort of resettled after the war, if they didn't go abroad, right?
Okay.
And in my neighborhood, we had a small community of Sri Lankans went to the same temple that I went to, and most of them was sort of well off because the neighborhood that I was in, it was a quite upper income neighborhood. But there was this one family who were very middle class. They were very nice people. I some of them babysat me and everything. But it was one older brother, his two younger sisters, and their mother, right? And the I cannot, I don't even know where to start when it comes to the emotional trauma that they went through. So there's one story that stuck with me the most, that sort of summed up the entire thing. The older brother, he was it was a fair bit older than his sisters, right? So what would happen is outside their home in northern Sri Lanka, Batticaloa, somewhere near there, they'd have army officers walk by in these like really heavy boots and drive like really loud motorbikes across their street. And they would know that they were there for two things: to either kill or kidnap anybody left, usually younger women, right? So what he would do, or what his parents would do, is put his sisters in like anything they can find, closets, any holes, like hide spaces, under tables, under beds, under behind furniture. They would put the girls there, and then they would make him hide in these like tiny little cabinets. So when the officers walked by, they could just say that no, nobody's home. They've all gone to school, they've gone somewhere else, they're at a different shelter. But the officers would come back later. And when they were living in Chennai, a city that was totally safe at the time, right?
Right.
The older brother, he literally had to buy a motorbike that was not that loud, because his sisters would literally like, they would shiver every time they heard like really, really loud motorbikes. And he like settled, he I think he had like a double degree in engineering or something, but he still settled for like a really low paying job near his house so he could like stay with the family as much as possible. And he didn't take them anywhere out. Like, I barely saw them outside because they were so scared of loud noises and other people, that only the older brother would come to the temple most of the time. And the only times we would see the sisters is if we go to their house, and they're always usually in the bedrooms or whatever, right? Because this is at the height of the war. This is like 2009, 2010, right? And I was very young at the time, so I didn't recognize most of what was going on. And uh, and there was one story. I think they lost their father in the war, during the war. And he told me this one story where they came back to their home and half their home was just missing because it had been shelled. They'd gone to a shelter. They said this was just a temporary move. You guys have to go there for a couple days. But by the time they came back, the half their apartment complex was just gone. because it had been shelled. And these are barely in the last 25 to 30 years, right?
Right.
And there is so much context that begs to be given to these stories, and that is just not given. Like I remember growing up and I saw like and just for context, anything that happened post 2000 maybe, most of it was filmed. The Sri Lankan army would film these deaths, and not just keep it, but for like some sort of weird you know I don't know, documentation purpose, but they would upload this to the internet. They would send this to people. They would email this to people, right? And if you go on YouTube right now and search this stuff, I also, again, if you guys are triggered by any of this, don't like to see blood, gore, do not look this subject up. Leave.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, I'm warning you right now.
Yeah, like like this stuff that we're talking about is really brutal. It really takes a toll. Like it's taking a toll on my mental health, right? And this is some asshole, like this is some asshole that lives in the United States and has the privilege to talk about all this on camera. I didn't have to deal with any of this, right? I didn't have to deal with the repercussions of what those bastards in the Sri Lankan army did. I don't have to deal with the repercussions that the bastards, the Rajapaksas did. I don't have to
Yeah.
deal with that shit.
Or even the stuff that the Tamil Tigers did at the end of the war. Because
Yeah.
their hands are not clean either.
Yes,
And the Indian
exactly.
army, the
Or the
American
Indian
army.
army, the American army as well. Yeah, I don't have to deal with those consequences, right? But those people that, like the people that Sandy is talking about here, like those people have to deal with that trauma. And it's gotten to a point where no one has come to help, to the point
This is
where like
in
they've told me to
Kanatil,
stop talking about it.
yeah. The
They've
people
already
being
given
talk
up
about
on
it, yeah.
this. They've given up.
They're like just stop talking. Like who cares? They're like nobody cares. They tried. I'll tell you something. There are some people who find out. So what happens is when you're in these situations, right? Let's assume you're a Tamil person in northern Sri Lanka in 2006 or to 2009, right? You would be moved to a shelter, and from there you would basically either have to wait through to jump through 7,000 different holes to get to a different country, or you would be put on these little rafts, right, to hopefully get to Tamil Nadu, right, where the Indian government would put you in some sort of camp. And from there, hopefully, you have the connections and hopefully the money, which most people didn't have. You would have that to move to maybe a different part of Tamil Nadu, a better part of Tamil Nadu, or to the west, more most likely Canada, Germany, or the UK, right? And you go there, and obviously you have to face all the racism that goes on over there. But back home, right? You've left half your family. You've left by half your family, I don't mean your great uncle, your aunt, your cousin once removed. I mean your father, your brother, your sister, your best friend from school, your husband, your wife, right? You have no idea what's going on, what's happening to them. Zero idea. And some people only figure out that their relatives, their closest relatives, are dead when the Sri Lankan army leaks videos of them killing, maiming, and then laughing at these dead bodies.
And there's
And
no
some
connection while they're in the country, is there?
no idea what's going on. Because you're fleeing shelling and bombing. You don't have a phone on you. There is this very famous case called the Isai
It-
Priya case. I don't know if you brought it
I
up.
already showed it. Yeah, we talked
Yeah.
about it.
So again, do not look her case up if you're sensitive to any type of images. But the way her family found out what actually really happened to her is when Channel 4 UK discovered the videos of her being pulled out. I don't know how explicit I can be, but her being quote unquote found on the side of the road, right, alive, while she was already missing for 4 days and everybody knew the Sri Lankan army took her, right?
Mhm.
Of her being pulled from the side of the road with no clothing on, nothing on, right? And then being questioned on camera and then being shot and being put in a hole with three other women.
And this
That
was
is
in
how her family found.
2009, wasn't it?
This is in 2009. This
Yeah.
is
This is all in
5 days
2009.
before. This is
What do you
5
like,
days
God?
before the end of the war,
Yes.
or I think the day of the end of the day the war ended. I'm not too
Yeah.
sure
Yeah,
on
It's
that.
not like
it's
But
this
around
is
that time.
old
It's
footage
May
or anything.
2009.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's May 2009. No, there was
and
another. I'm gonna hopefully this isn't too explicit. I've said it on stream before and I didn't get in trouble, but uh, I've said it on Aston Max stream before, and I didn't get like I didn't get striked for this, but another Sri Lankan soldier basically when this is another woman, a nameless some nameless woman, right? We don't know who she was. Issei Priya was lucky, by the way, right? In the like as fucked up as all the stuff that we're talking about is, she's actually relatively lucky because she had a name on her. There's more. There's for every Issei Priya like that's famous. There's like 20. There's like 20 people. There's hundreds of women that don't have a name on them that are buried in these mass graves next to these landmines, right? And so there was another Sri Lankan soldier that uploaded a video, and he was talking about a dead woman that was laying on the side of the road. Massive trigger warning, chat. Mute right now because what I'm about to say is so utterly disgusting. Um, that Sri Lankan soldier said, "Should I cut her tits off?"
yeah, and in a different video, I'm not sure if you're talking about the same video,
No, it's a
but
different video.
there is a different video where a different Sri Lankan soldier looks at a different nameless woman, and he looks at her and goes, "I'd like to do her again."
I'd like to fuck it again, is what they said.
Yeah,
They said no.
and
They
by
said
the
that
way,
they said that about Issei Priya.
yeah, I'm not sure. The thing is, this is a common recurrence. You hear a lot of this. I don't know, commentary, I guess, by Sri Lankan army people in a lot of these videos. The thing is, I don't understand a lot of Sinhala, so and honestly, a lot of these videos are just disturbing to watch. So I haven't. When you watch them, you're not listening very much. But
We're
from
relying
what
on the
I've seen,
translations here, but
but that is what's being said in a lot of these videos. And again, you don't like. Again, I'm saying this over and over again. If you guys are sensitive to blood or any visuals like that, please, for God's sake, back off from this topic. You don't need knowledge as much as you need your inner peace. Like, do not look this shit up. Don't,
yeah,
right? And the thing is, I was 9 years old, 10 years old, aware of this stuff because it was on TV,
yeah,
right? And this is why it pisses me off so much when people try to generalize this issue. This is the reason why nobody is talking about this. Is it comes down to one simple reason. It's because it's a bunch of brown people, right?
yeah,
It's a bunch of brown people. So it's got to be their issue. It's got to be our problem, right?
What's so?
As if
What is some policies, some actions you would like to see taken? I mean, obviously we would have like a laundry list of things that are utopian that we would hope for, but what are some things like in the immediate time that you would like to see happen?
first of all, for the UN, right, to acknowledge the absolute tomfoolery that they did in the last stages of the war, right? Let me tell you something. Again, more stories. Shocker. Um, in the last stages of the war. Arun, did you speak about the no-fire zone?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so in the in the hospitals and stuff.
Yeah, I talked about how there's this one story about this one 6-year-old boy who was shot in the leg, and they didn't have any anesthesia in that camp. And so one of the NGO workers basically had to cover the boy's mouth and saw the boy's leg off while the boy was screaming in agony.
Uh, do you know? Did you tell him about why he was shot in the no-fire zone?
No, you can go ahead and say that. I'm not even aware of this. Go ahead.
Okay, so these hospitals in these no-fire zones were set up in decrepit old buildings, schools, and stuff like that, right? And so how war works is that if you're setting up any hospitals or shelters in no-fire zones, you would give the GPS locations to both the uh, to all parties involved, right? Including so the American government and a lot of aid organizations, they got these coordinates. The Sri Lankan government got these coordinates, and the Rebel Alliance, the Tigers, got these coordinates, right? Which was the worst possible thing you could have done because these doctors were practically begging for them not to do this. They said, "Do not release these coordinates," because what happened is this: as soon as these coordinates got out, these rebel alliances who were being pushed back would run into these no-fire zones and hide amongst the people. So what the Sri Lankan government would do is that they'd say, "Oh, these are all rebels, every single one of them," right? And would start bombing these hospitals. So while you were getting treated for your leg that just fell off, a shell would hit 20 feet away from you.
Yeah. Again, to draw it back to, because we have a very American audience for a lot of us, this is the first time that we're hearing about these things. You see the same kind of justification chat from the IDF, like a year and a half ago when that press building got leveled. They'll say that, Hamas is using it as a hideout, so that's why we leveled this children's hospital.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's you can draw lots of parallels with the situation in
What people don't realize is that what's happening in Israel and Palestine right now with Hamas and the IDF basically played out in a in a very similar fashion, but in a more barbaric way in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka is a huge warning sign of what's coming in the whole Israel-Palestine issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to like give everybody who's maybe doesn't like really understand how this is working to have like a, something in their mind that they could tie it to.
And the thing is, like, here's the other thing, right? The thing is, like, there's in a weird sense, at least the Palestinians have like a massive like leftist coalition working in the United States. There's at least that. And the situation in Palestine and Israel is that like it's not like the IDF is still like doing horrible abuses in the Palestinian regions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least there are leftists talking about that. There are people talking about it there are lots of people of Arab descent. There are lots of Muslims talking about this because it affects them to some degree. But this situation doesn't have anyone that can sympathize with them in the same way, right? Because the thing is, the majority of Tamils are Hindus. And the only problem is like in India, you have like a Hindu nationalist government that doesn't even give a shit. Like that basically is Hindu nationalist is not even the right word for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're Aryan nationalists, right? They're North Indian nationalists, right? Because they also like at deep down, they would also like us wiped off the face of the planet. Right? They would also like Tamils wiped off.
Yeah, there's like if you go on the internet and tell a North Indian nationalist that, hey, look, I'm a Tamil person, they'd call you the N-word.
Yeah.
I mean, Arun, didn't you say earlier that you were called a terrorist for saying something about Sri Lanka?
That was by a Sri Lankan guy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was by a Sri Lankan guy. The thing is, like, I'll also get the same shit from North Indians. I'll get the same shit from other Indians. I'll get the same shit from other Indians if I talk about this issue as well. Because in their eyes as well, again, Tamils are also portrayed as terrorists in media as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a show called Family Man 2, or there's a movie called Family Man 2, where the Tamils in that movie are portrayed as terrorists,
Oh, nice.
right? So
Yeah.
there's a couple of stereotypes with Tamils. One is nerds, basically, Tambrams. The other
Yeah.
are like village protectors or whatever, right? Like we call them Anachis, right? Um,
hmm
and then the third stereotype about Tamil people is
Is that we're fucking terrorists.
that we're fucking terrorists.
And
No,
and
Vox
there's
and
also
Socks. No, Vox and Socks. No. Tamil tigers are terrorists, right? The tigers, the LTTE are terrorists, right? So I
they
want to be
are
clear about
terrorists, but yeah.
they are terrorists, right? But not all Tamils are terrorists. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are terrorists. They have committed they've committed horrific acts of violence against people, and they've also committed ethnic cleansing. And like that's why I'm not a supporter of the LTTE,
Yeah.
right?
Like no sane Tamil person actually supports the LDT,
Yes.
right? And the people who do, it's 99% of the time propaganda.
Yeah, and
Propaganda that started after the war was actually over.
yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, another reason why Tamil people in India are portrayed as radical or terrorist is because the culture is largely caste abolitionist, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And the North Indian nationalists would love for caste to stay
Yeah.
because that's how they
Exactly.
retain power. In the South, like if you were a South Indian politician or a Tamil politician to be specific, and you went out there and you said, "Hey, look, I support caste," even the most casteist person would ask you to shut up.
So
Even if
there's a big divide between North and South regions in their politics as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And so
Because Tamil politics, Tamil politics, right, is largely we do something called Dravidian socialism, where it's a spin on socialism, but with a lot of Dravidian principles, and that includes caste abolitionist, something called the self-respect movement, and a lot of these guys were talking about female liberation in the 1920s,
yeah,
Could you
before the
talk a
West
little
was
bit
we're
more
talking
on
talking
about
that?
about
it.
live-ins. Like we're talking about like the guy that was I mean, again, like Periyar had some yikes moments as well, but like the guy that was
Yeah.
spearheading this movement was talking about like cohabitation in like the fucking 1920s in India.
Could
Just
you
to give you an idea.
could you go into a little more detail on how do you say it? Dravidian
So
socialism?
Uh,
Dravidian basically is it's almost synonymous with Tamil at this point, like to a certain degree. But Dravidian is like a group of languages that are largely spoken in the southern part of India.
Okay.
So like
Southern and some eastern parts of India.
so yeah, some eastern parts of India. So you have Tamil, Malayalam, which is spoken in the Indian state of Kerala, Kannada, and Telugu, which are the four major ones in the south, right?
And then Tulu, Konkani,
Konkani
and
is
some
not.
other.
Yeah.
Konkani is influenced,
Yeah, so you have a
largely
bunch.
influenced.
So you have a bunch of like languages largely in the South that are Dravidian origin, right? But Dravidian
hmm
itself is it comes from the word Tamil actually.
Okay.
It comes from the word Tamil originally, right? So basically, like when you're talking about politics in the South, Dravidian politics is basically synonymous with like anti-caste like caste abolitionist politics in the South.
Okay.
And to give some context, the reason why it does that, it's not some sort of like so when people say, "Oh, Dravidian politics," that means you're Tamil nationalist. That's not what it is. So in Dravidian culture per se, which is a lot of the source material that exists is in Tamil, but if you look at Malayalam and Telugu, a lot of the sort of culture goes back to the literature, right? That's why it was so significant that in the 1980s, a lot of the literature was burnt in the Jaffna Public Library,
hmm
right? It all goes back to the Sangam period, the Chola period, thousands of years. So just to be a little bit of a history nerd, but there was a 2,000 year history in the southern states of India, where called the Sangam period, the golden age of literature, where you would just have day long poetry slams in royal settings, where you would have these poets from as far as Rome come in, right, and just present political, social, religious ideas, right? And they would debate with kings, they would debate from other poets, they would debate from their own literature, they would debate about trade, money, everything, medicine, right? And that makes, and the literature that comes up from sort of that era is what makes up the Dravidian culture as a whole. There's so much. There's one very important saying that is that kind of sums up the idea of Dravidian literature. That is Yadu Mure Yavarum Kedir. That means every place is my home and everybody is my relative,
I like
which
that.
means that it's just a wonderful. And there's a person called Thiruvalluvar who wrote basically 2,000 short form proses,
Hmm.
and they dictate how you must live life, right? Things like everything from how to build forts to how you're supposed to buy clothes, and this is 2,000 years old, right? And I would actually for people who are visually stimulated, like visuals, right? There's a trailer for a movie, I'll put it in a chat. It's called Ponni and Selvan.
Hmm.
It's actually coming out. Okay, don't
Just,
laugh at it. It's a good starting point,
no,
right?
I no, it's just a chuckle. It's like no, I like the trailer, and this is like someone who is not a big fan of empires, by the way, but
Yeah.
basically, long story short, Ponniyin Selvan is a book that was written in the 50s, and it's basically like you
Hmm.
can kind of think of it as like Game of Thrones, but it's actually kind of real because a lot of the
It's
uh
based on Dravidian culture.
it it's based on actual like dynasties in it was
Yeah,
based
true.
on it's based on a Chola dynasty, Ponniyin Selvan.
Yeah.
Watch the one in Tamil.
The teaser, I think the teaser or the trailer, I'm not too sure, just came out, and the movie comes out in September.
The
I have the
third one,
first.
number 3, the third one.
Oh, oh,
Not this one, not this one.
here, the
Yeah.
third one. This
I
one.
have the book in my hand right now.
Yeah, the second video on
Um,
that list, right?
Okay.
Yes. So
I
it's
think
called.
this
This is the no. The name of the book is the same. The book is called Ponniyin Selvan, right?
the movie is also called Peninsula.
Yeah. So I don't know this book. Yeah, Ponniyin Selvan is like probably the most important piece of Tamil literature in like recent history.
This looks
Because-
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm back. How's chat doing? What's up, Ice Beans?
So this is actually a love story, in essence, right? I actually have the first book in my hand right now, and I'm reading it right now, and it's in essentially boiled down, it's a love story,
Yes.
and
But there's a lot of political intrigue here.
yeah, there's so much politically.
This is like the Tamil Troy.
You
I
could
don't-
say that.
Yeah, you could say
You, I
that,
mean,
yeah.
okay, look, comparison wise, yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
super
like,
hard to
broad
make a
strokes,
comparison
right?
here, but like yes.
Okay.
Like it's like this is like to give you an idea, like Bahubali is like is another movie that you've probably seen. It's like over the top, like, but basically like that's a ripoff of like Hindu literature, right? It's a ripoff of the Mahabharata. This is actually like literature come to life, basically.
Yeah. And
This is like
a lot of this, it is highly dramatized, obviously,
Mhm.
but a lot of these characters actually existed 2,000 years ago.
yeah, like Raja Raja Chola was actually like in this movie, and he's a real guy. He was like,
Yeah.
or yeah, Raja Raja Chola is like
Aditya
basic
Karigalan,
Karigalan. Yes, Karigalan
yeah,
is a yeah.
another
A
king.
lot of these movies are fucking. I mean, a lot of these characters are real, right? Um, and so like this, going back to Sri Lanka, for example, and going back to like sort of the treatment of Tamils in both India and Sri Lanka, right? Like there's a lot of fucking opposition, like in comparison to stuff like Israel or Palestine. And I'm not trying to do like a pissing contest
Mhm.
here, but basically the situation is that there has been absolutely fucking no one coming to the aid of the Sri Lankan Tamils. There has been no one. And the reason for that is, and so something to illustrate, there's like almost no fucking GoFundMe for reparations. There's nothing like that. Right?
Also, people at this point, they're like, we don't need anything. Just leave us the fuck alone.
Exactly. Like they're telling us to leave this, they're telling us to leave this story aside. They're telling us to leave this stuff aside because they've already dealt with enough. They just want to live, because a lot of these guys live in Canada, they live in the UK, they live in Australia. They're refugees, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're refugees in Commonwealth countries, right? And they just want to be left the fuck alone. They've told me, like, listen, don't talk about this. You're only going to make things worse
Like,
for everyone.
You're just like wasting your energy.
You're wasting your energy. Stop. Do you think it's because people don't know? I knew nothing about any of this until a few hours ago. Yeah, it's because every fucking news outlet has basically towed the line of the Sri Lankan government. Everyone has, except for maybe the BBC. Right?
And that's because there's a huge amount of Tamil refugees living in the UK.
Exactly.
A huge
It's
amount.
like the collective trauma. They don't want to be reminded of
Dude,
this thing. And
the
it's the defeatism.
UK and Canada have more holidays commemorating the Tamil genocide than India and Sri Lanka do.
Oh, Ice Beans is saying in the chat, there was an Anthony Bourdain episode he did before he died, and it actually touched on the plight of the Tamil people, and I remember people were shocked. Ice Beans is Sri Lankan herself, by the way, just for context, right? But she comes from a group called the Burghers, right? So they're basically like, they're mixed, like Europeans and Sinhala people, basically.
Okay.
So, she's part colonizer, basically. We joke about that, but she's basically she comes from a mixed ethnicity background, right?
Okay.
So when she's talking about Sri Lanka, this also hits her personally to a certain degree as well.
Yeah.
This probably hits her more than it hits me, actually.
Yeah.
Because her family's in Sri Lanka right now.
I like that she's bringing up Anthony Bourdain, because I remember the first time I ever heard the name Henry Kissinger and learned about what we did in Cambodia was through Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, exactly. Anthony Bourdain is actually, rest in power, man. But
God tier.
God tier, yeah. And the important part was, I remember people were shocked and upset that he was being sympathetic to them.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an idea,
Arun, I completely I'm so sorry. If I have ADHD, if I don't tell you this now, I'll completely forget about it. The story that I told you about my neighbors growing up.
yes.
So they moved they moved back to Sri Lanka in, I want to say 2011, 2012, right? And we lost contact with them. We had no idea what happened to them. And recently, we figured out that once things started getting bad again economically in 2014 and 15, he tried to move to Myanmar, where part of my family is from. I'm part Burmese. He tried to move there, but I think he couldn't get a job because he was, even though his family suffered under the both the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government, they said hiring a Tamil person from Sri Lanka is just too hard right now, and he couldn't come back to India. And now we have no idea what happened to them. We can't get them on the phone. We have just no idea what happened to them in the last 6 or 7 years.
That's
They're just
so
missing.
insane.
Because another thing to keep in mind is, after the Civil War, the government would often just kidnap people that they didn't like, accuse them of being terrorists, and then what they would do is they would actually contact the families of the kidnapped, and they would demand a ransom for that, right? Now the thing is, in many cases, the body's already been buried before the ransom was paid.
Jesus Christ.
This is like common.
Body being buried is gracious. Like, you'd be happy if you turn up in a ditch near an army camp. They're not gonna bury you. If they don't burn you, they're not gonna bury you.
Yeah, they're gonna just dispose of your body, like, as much as they can. Like, they just hide the evidence as much as possible, right? Like this is like we're talking about stuff that is like it shocks the conscience when we talk about this sort of thing. Yeah, everyone gets pissy. Now we'll say sometimes it's just because they're having to face facts that are new and not comfortable and doesn't fit with what they know about the war. Yeah, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier,
Yeah.
Ice Beans, right? Like the stuff that like the average sentiment in Sri Lanka is that Tamil Tiger's bad, and because they were so bad, whatever Sri Lankan government did good. Right? That's the general sentiment in Sri Lanka, except for those that are very well aware of the atrocities committed by the Sri Lankan government over the past several decades.
Yes,
It sounds like they don't
South
like
I
to hide
mean,
the
I don't know if
evidence.
that's
I was
Celticness. I don't know if that's how you say your name, but yeah, the UK and EU and Canada have more holidays and commemoration days regarding the
No,
Sri
I want
Lankan.
to I want to I want to interject one thing, right? You are actually not allowed to commemorate the genocide in Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
You're not allowed
if
to
you're
do
a
that.
Tamil person, if you mourn the dead or commemorate the genocide, you could have army people storming your house and
Yeah,
throwing everybody out and arresting you and
and
cracking a
cracking is
skull or two.
exactly. Like you can't even commemorate your dead loved ones. You
I mean,
can't even do that.
you
You
are
have
right.
no rights as a
They locked down the north of the country on all sorts of commemoration days. You
like
can't
the
you
north
have
of
a
the
curfew. You
country.
can't leave the house.
Yeah, there's also like the Sri Lankan army basically did a military occupation of the north and eastern side of Sri Lanka.
That
And we were
still
talking about
exists.
it still exists. Yeah, there's still a military occupation in the north and eastern parts of Sri Lanka, right? But the other thing that we talked about the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport, no acknowledgement whatsoever. We are not even close to global acknowledgement. We're nowhere near that. Half the
India won't even acknowledge it.
India doesn't acknowledge it. India doesn't like to give you an idea of how fucked the situation is, right? Like there's a politician who I absolutely despise in India by the name of Subramaniam Swamy. That piece of shit, bastard, scum piece of shit, right? And I'm getting very emotional when I talk about this piece of shit, right? This guy is a Tamil person himself who has lobbied the Modi government to overlook. He has historically blamed everything, all the human rights abuses on the LTTE. He refuses to acknowledge the shit that the Sri Lankan government did. This is a Tamil person himself, by the way. This is a Tamil person, right? He
That comes down
refuses
to the
to.
fact that he's a complete fucking casteist asshole.
Yeah, he's a Brahmin. He's a Tamil Brahmin, right? And that's the reason, right? So he doesn't view Tamils as his equals, basically, right? But basically, it comes like he has lobbied the Modi government to basically say, hey, please do not press Sri Lanka about their war crimes. Do not press Sri Lanka about their war crimes. Do not press Sri Lanka on their war crimes, right? And then the Modi government didn't, right? India won't recognize it, right? To give you an idea of how messed up the fucking situation is, right? Right? There was a Tamil Elam inevitable. Okay. This I'm not 100% sure about, but like again, I'm not a big fan of like what I call Elam posters, but like a lot of people that are just like pro Tamil. I get like that's another story, right? But there's a bill that was passed in India called the CAA and NRC, the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Registry of Citizens, right? And those are the two laws that India uses to basically oppress Muslims, right? They basically kick undocumented Muslims off the national registry list, and they basically kick everyone off, and they only let non-Muslims in. But the whole reason behind this is the whole reason they passed these two laws in the first place. The whole rhetoric behind that Modi was talking about, that the Modi government was talking about was we need to quote unquote protect Hindus coming in from that are being genocided in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, right? That was the whole thing, the whole hubbubaloo about this entire thing was that Hindus are being genocided in the neighboring countries, right? And like we need to protect them and we need to give them citizenship, right? That was the whole reason behind these two acts that they gave, right? This is not the actual reason they passed these two laws in the first place, obviously. They did this to basically and that's basically did this to oppress Muslims, right? But the one country that they left off of that list was Sri Lanka. So if you're Sri Lanka, if you're a Sri Lankan Tamil refugee, according to these assholes, these so-called Hindu nationalist assholes, you don't automatically get citizenship, even though you are an actual victim of genocide. This goes to show you how fucked the situation is, right? India will not recognize. India's involved in all of this. Why the fuck would they recognize any of this?
You could be fleeing active persecution in Sri Lanka, but you need to go through the 6-7 month visa process like anybody else.
Exactly. The one fucking country you would expect to actually give a shit about this refuses to even acknowledge it as a genocide.
And you know what's a double whammy? India is profiting from the economic downturn in Sri Lanka because an Indian company called the Adani Corporation, Australians might know the name, I'll tell you why later, just bought the entire power grid.
Yes.
Right? And the reason why the Adani Corporation is infamous in Australia is because they fucking mine extremely dangerous and ecologically disastrous coal mines in Australia.
One of you mentioned a moment ago how it shocks the conscience, right? You're not sure how to like process all of it. So if I'm quiet right now, it's only because like I thought whenever I asked you, Arun, to come and explain it, that it would be like, oh yeah, there's these guys, they have a generation of power, they're like doing fucked up shit. The depths that the depravity goes to boggles the mind.
Yeah. That's why I'm like on a warpath to talk about this.
Good.
That's why, because no one, because I'm going to be honest, fucking no one else is going to talk about this. No one else is going to talk about this. Like I think almost every Twitch streamer that knows about this because I fucking told them about this.
Right.
Before this, they've never, the most they know about what happened in Sri Lanka is like, like people are protesting. They stormed the president's palace and they're like chilling in the pool. That's basically what everyone knows, right? They don't know the depths of like the inhumanity that has happened in Sri Lanka. They don't know.
And Pascal made a very good point. Horror is forgotten or horror is repeated. That is, I'm telling you, what they tried and tested in Sri Lanka is happening in Israel and Palestine.
Exactly.
Right now,
and by the way,
and it's only going to get worse.
By the way,
and Pakistan, and by the way, Pakistan is going down the same exact economic route as Sri Lanka, with spiraling debt to China and somehow the United States, and this is gonna go exactly the same fucking way.
Yeah.
And except it's gonna be twice as violent in Pakistan because everyday Sri Lankan people did not own firearms. In Pakistan, you're allowed to have firearms.
Yeah.
And even if you're not allowed to have firearms, Pakistan's a bit of a military coup. So you can just buy whatever the hell you want. Anything from coke to fucking AK-47s.
Pakistan is like another can of worms that I don't even want to get into because they also committed an open genocide of Bangladesh that no one's held them accountable for.
Yeah, honestly, I can't talk that much about it because I haven't.
The whole reason Bangladesh exists.
Yeah.
The whole reason Bangladesh exists is because they were part of Pakistan and they committed a genocide of Bengalis.
Yeah.
That's a whole.
And everybody in chat wondering what you can do about this whole Sri Lanka situation. You can. There's no amount of money that's going to fix this. There's nowhere you can go and donate to anyone. Right? Like, if you can, like, do your own research on who's sending aid to Sri Lanka. Because honestly, at this point, I have no fucking idea. But the best you can do is just talk to people.
And thank you for resubscribing.
Share stuff. right?
Yes.
Look up articles that you can share to your politically aware friends and family would be willing to lend a ear. Just do
Uh,
that.
so Celticness. I'm gonna answer your the question I just saw in the chat. So the reason I kind of like winced at that is because the problem with like just openly supporting Tamil Ilam is that I mean, like you can support Tamil Ilam, but don't support the Tigers, is what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say, because the Tamil Tigers also have blood on their hands. You see what I mean? Like, so a lot of people that do that sort of thing are like straight up Tamil Tiger supporters, right? And again, I don't blame them for supporting the Tamil Tigers again. Because here's the thing. Here's why this thing is so complicated to talk about. Because a lot of the refugees that support the Tigers, right? I mean, a lot of it is, like Sandy said, a lot of it is propaganda after the Civil War, right? But like fucking no one else was fighting on behalf of the Tamils. No one was fighting the oppression of the Sri Lankan government except for these war criminals, except for these
Like India,
warlords.
India, India tried for at the beginning, but then the Tamil Tigers went and assassinated an Indian president. So they switched
No,
sides.
they assassinated the Indian.
Prime Minister. Sorry, Prime
They,
Minister.
they
Indian Prime
assassinated the
Minister.
prime. No, they assassinated the prime minister because the prime minister basically changed his position, changed India's position on the civil war, and basically did war crimes in Sri Lanka. So the IPKF war crimes that we were talking about, he co-signed that. He signed that, right? So then the Tamil Tigers turned on India for that as well, right?
So,
Yep.
everyone's probably wondering, like, how can I help? What's something I can do? Books that you would recommend? People to follow, journalists. Is there any recommendations in that regard? Stuff
Yes.
to educate them.
So there's one guy I highly recommend. His name is Ahilan Kadirgamar, right?
Mhm.
So I'll put his name in the chat.
Okay. And I'm going
Anything
to,
done?
for chatters, everything that Arun sent me today in DMs, I'm going to put
Yeah.
that in the stream discussion channel in the Discord after stream so that you can
Right.
have all those resources as well.
There is one GoFundMe that I found that I think is a pretty decent. That I think is somewhat decent. It has his name on it, and if you want to help Sri Lanka in some way, the best way would probably be to like maybe give him money through this.
Yeah.
Where did I put this? Where did I put this? It's here somewhere. Jump to present.
Yeah, and also, boy meets Winnie, you are right. The chief minister of my state right now is named Stalin.
Shut the fuck up.
Yes.
His name is
Yes.
Stalin, and he was named after the Stalin that you're thinking of.
Yes.
Absolutely.
His name is Muthuvel Karunanidhi Stalin, and yes, he was named. His first name is
Yeah.
Stalin.
Oh, okay.
So-
you,
And
you do surnames
you
first.
find
Okay.
you find like no, not surnames. We have a naming system where, so basically in the 1930s, right?
Mhm.
We abolished the caste system. So last names in India, in most of India, are caste names. Family names, as you guys say, right? For example, John Smith, right? But Smith would be the name of a caste. Like Sharma,
Oh.
Patel, these are all castes, right?
Oh,
So in
okay.
Tamil Nadu, we banished that and we said, you know what, just take your dad's name or your mom's name or just make up a last name, whatever the fuck you would like, right?
Yeah.
So how we do it is we have the first name and then your dad's name.
Oh.
So, or an initial, which is your dad's name, and then your name. So MK is his dad's name. That's his initial. And
Yeah.
Stalin is his name.
Right.
So his name would actually be Stalin Muthuvel Karunanidhi.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I
Well-
know you're addressing only fact. I want to cut in before you do.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka has some textile industry, but you got to understand they're competing with Bangladesh, and they're competing with
Oh.
Pakistan.
Bangladesh is in a much better place right now.
Exactly. So that's the other problem. So they're also competing
Risu,
with
thank you
like
for the follow.
Bangladesh, and they're competing with other South Asian nations.
Oh, Sri Lanka is like competing with who
India.
the fuck are they competing? Not India. Dude,
I mean, not
no.
India. They're competing with like Pakistan. They're competing with
Pakistan, yeah. But Pakistan is not as bad yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say like for they're competing with any of the other island countries like Andaman. But
But
Andaman doesn't.
I'm gonna go back to. I want to go back to the thing that you asked, Gremloe.
Mhm.
What is one thing that we can do as far as the current economic crisis is concerned? There's really not much that you can do other than like, you can just talk about like, or like you can donate some money to some of these GoFundMe's. The reason it took me so long to come up with this is again like these are like they didn't do a great job publicizing this, honestly.
Right.
They did not do a good job with this, and it's not, again, I'm not blaming them obviously, but I'm saying like the thing is like this is largely meant for remittances. This is largely meant for people PP people abroad. This is meant
Arun
for
is
people
losing.
Well,
I'm losing my mind right
that's
now.
okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
look,
Well-
I have had my mind blown. That's why I'm not able to really like put it into words.
I will say one more thing before we like close up for today. The other thing I really want chat to do is educate yourself on this or like do some education with regards to some of the atrocities that were committed by the Sri Lankan government over the past several decades. And
Can I
basically
just
the
butt in on
open
that? Can I just butt in on that? Because
yeah,
I'm so sorry if this is taking so long. But if you guys, again, I'm very sorry. But if you guys are sensitive to any of this information and don't want to actually look at images, please come to one of us. We will give you resources where you don't have to look at explicit stuff.
exactly. Can I shout out my Discord? I've actually I actually have like a bunch of stuff pinned in my Discord, and Sandy will actually go ahead and add some resources as well. She's very
wait
good when
like 2 minutes to shout out your Discord. Trust me.
we'll do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trust me. Okay.
Okay, we'll do.
The reason
we'll
that
wait.
I want to bring this to a close is because the only thing I can do right now is offer you like my platform to be able to like educate me and chat on. So to wrap this up, because if you're okay with it, I do want to post this conversation afterwards. Thank you for like taking the time to like. This is very personal for you. You're very passionate about it, and you have a deep connection with it. So I know that those things are difficult at times because like, you're getting impassioned about it, right? So thank you for being able to like open up about it. Is just all I want to say.
Yeah, I want to doubly thank you for. I mean, I've already thanked you like a lot of. I thanked you a lot for a lot of stuff already. First of all, I want to thank you for. I came in chat one day. I still can't like your kindness is your kindness is massive. I came in chat one day. I just wanted to say hi. Hey, you had a nice shirt, and then you told your chat to go follow me, and you got me over the line to 300 followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a kind gesture for someone to do. I've been over the moon since, and I've tried to. I don't have that many people. I have a very small community, but that moved me so much that I was like, I got to do this for everyone else. I got to pay it forward, right?
Well, I mean, you're about to be really moved because I'm sending everyone over to you. So.
No, stop.
I mean, it's happening, so prepare yourself for it.
Oh my god.
Chat,
oh my god.
I'm not even gonna cap this stream off because I have a feeling Arun's gonna take this opportunity to, bring a little bit more knowledge to you. Like I told everybody, all the resources that he sent me, they're gonna be in the Discord. He'll get you his Discord whenever you're over there. So I'm gonna
dude, you're too kind. You don't have to do this.
do what?